Hormone replacement therapy clinics seem to be on every single corner of every single town. There's half a dozen in the small town I live in. And right now, hormone replacement therapy is being touted as the cure-all for menopause, andropause, your aches, your pains, and every woe you possibly have. I'm not sure if this is true, but maybe it is. April, can you start us off with, your thoughts on that? These hormone clinics that are on every corner?
Yes, absolutely, Shayna. So, yeah, I think that a lot of women are seeking answers, and a lot of women are feeling, distrustful and getting a lot of excess information on social media as
Mm,
far as hormone replacement therapy is the best thing, and your doctor's being a bad doctor if they're not prescribing hormone replacement therapy. But in my opinion, I actually think if your doctor has some hesitation or reserve before prescribing the HRT, that's a sign of a good doctor because they
mhm.
want to make sure that you're, first of all, a candidate for HRT. And they want to make sure that they're not doing harm. That's what we do as doctors. We take oaths to do no harm. So um, it's definitely not a cure-all. Not everybody's a candidate for
Right.
HRT.
This is something that's super important. I've even seen with oral contraceptives, oral birth control, of people, medical practitioners, not considering the red flags or the contraindications for prescribing it. And some of them are similar for hormone replacement. One of the big ones I see often is migraines or family history of clotting disorders, and that's a reason to not be prescribing estrogen. And I have a family member that was prescribed hormonal birth control without taking that into consideration, and we don't know her genetic makeup. And I think that that's pretty sloppy healthcare.
Absolutely. So I like that you spoke to the genetic makeup because that's actually one tool that I use to determine if somebody is a candidate for HRT.
Oh,
So
interesting.
I'm not Yes. So I'm not looking like at and first of all, I think we should back up for our listeners that the big concerns with HRT are that the clotting strokes, but also breast cancer.
Uh-huh.
And there's, been a research study, a meta-analysis that came out a while back that essentially, I think, made practitioners feel okay with prescribing the HRT because it showed that if they prescribe HRT early in menopause, as opposed to late in menopause, and if they're not on it for too long, that it didn't seem to raise risk of breast cancer.
Okay.
However, when we do these kinds of studies, we're including the entire, one whole population, and we're not at the point yet where we're considering individual genetics in these
Mm,
big studies. And
mm-hmm.
so, to me, these studies feel a little bit watered down because we are not looking at individual makeup. So we
I
can't really
see.
apply it to the patient in front of us.
So are you talking about like the BRCA1 and BRCA2 gene, or are there other genes that you're taking into consideration?
Great question. I'm actually not looking at BRCA1 and BRCA2 for this
Okay.
because I'm looking at genes that are a little bit more upstream, that are the ones that are actually turning those BRCA genes into their adverse position.
Aha.
And so some of those genes I'm looking at have to do with how much estrogen does the woman produce? Do they push their estrogens into the proliferative cancer causing types of estrogens? Because when we have estrogen in our body, whether it's our own estrogen or estrogen from the outside, like an HRT or birth control, our body has to metabolize those. And some
Uh-huh.
of us metabolize those into good, healthy estrogens that are protective of the heart and the bones. And some of us um, push them more into the cancer causing estrogens,
So you're
which
talking
is
about like
why,
E2, like estradiol versus estrone, or what's the other one?
no,
OH16?
yes. So I'm talking more about like the 4-OH metabolite is the more
Uh-huh.
proliferative
Gotcha.
metabolite. And some
The
of us
bad
will
guy.
push the estrogens into that bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of us have a more protective gene that helps us to push our genes away from the bad guy.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
so I can look at a combination of like three genes to say, okay, are you somebody that pushes your estrogen first of all into the proliferative cancer-causing kind and lacks that protection in moving it into the good kind? And
Uh-huh.
so, for example, myself, I when I look at it in this way, I can kind of generalize and say I'm pushing about 75% of my estrogens into the proliferative kind. So I am not a candidate for HRT.
What's your
My little
percentage
sister,
cutoff?
oh, um, That's a great question. Maybe 25.
Okay. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Like you're low risk, like at risk, but overall feeling better might be more beneficial for the person. Get their exercise, get some of the other foundations for health in place, and that might help to reduce that risk from taking the hormones. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it.
Uh-huh.
That's not something that's like necessarily been researched in this way, but like anything else in naturopathic or root cause medicine, we have to look at what makes sense sometimes.
Right.
And we know that, when women get breast cancer, we're checking to see, are they estrogen positive cancers, which most of them are. That means that they are proliferated and perpetuated and they
Mm-hmm.
grow because of too much estrogen, and not just any estrogen, but specifically the 4-OH bad
Interesting.
estrogen. So we need to look at that. And not to mention, like, so that's just the estrogen part of things, but we also have to look at what's causing inflammation in the body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so genetically, some people produce more inflammation, some people produce more cortisol naturally and cannot turn that off switch. They don't have the off switch for cortisol in the HPA axis. So
Oh,
between the adrenal
interesting.
glands and the brain, they don't have a good off switch. So they just keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that in the genetics.
And you're
And
saying
then
when you
I'm also,
say off
yeah.
switch, sorry to interrupt you, the off switch is like,
Mhm.
oh, you have a certain amount. Okay, body, we don't need to be making anymore. Like a lot of our hormones are regulated in this way. We have kind of like a thermostat is the way I think about it, or a set point. And a lot of people have different set points, but some people, it sounds like, don't really have a good set point that the body is regulating well.
That's a really good way to look at it. Yeah, if like even more specifically, they're producing more of a protein that
Mm-hmm.
gets that binds to the hypothalamus
Okay.
at the same place that cortisol, the stress hormone, binds to.
Uh-huh.
So because they have too much of this protein, it's blocking that connection. So
I
the body
see.
can't see that
Aha.
it's already that producing too much cortisol and too much stress. And
Yeah.
the reason why this is important is because stress and inflammation, just cortisol and inflammation are the two biggest genetic blockers, meaning we
Mm-hmm.
have tumor um, we have special genes that help to suppress tumors. And so they can turn those tumor suppressing genes off
I
if
see.
we have too much cortisol and too much inflammation. And so
Sure.
I'm kind of looking more at the things like all the balance in the body from like a holistic standpoint, and by understanding the genetics specifically in order to try to improve longevity, reduce breast cancer risk. And that all goes into the formula of if somebody needs to have, should have HRT. Because
Sure.
there are some candidates, like if people are, you know, they're really not pushing any of their estrogens into the bad pathway and they have some protection in there,
Mm-hmm.
I might say, and if they're just miserable with hot flashes and they're not sleeping, I might say, you know what? Yeah, like go on a little bit of, estrogen and progesterone to kind of balance things out and just for a short time to kind of get you through this. That
Sure.
could totally be an option. But honestly, that's that's more rare that somebody has good genes like that.
Yeah.
Now,
And
I don't want to say rare, but it's
less
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 likely.
common. Yeah. And again,
Hmm.
then even if they don't have the genetic makeup that makes them more predisposed to stress and inflammation, we live in a world that is not meant for the way humans, as I understand it, are meant to live. Like we're in a go go go, especially in the US culture, that we don't really get a chance to relax, and then we go through menopause and it's full steam ahead because we drop our estrogen, which is anti inflammatory, amongst other things that it does. Hormones make you feel good in lots of ways, especially that estrogen. And I know from postpartum, like, man, I was feeling the loss of the estrogen there. It sucked. And I even told my husband, I was like, man, if this is what my precursor to menopause is going to be, I don't love this. Because I had lots of skin issues and my joints, like I literally, every one of my joints hurt, April. It was awful. So I kind of got a glimpse into like what some of my patients have been dealing with. And it's not just like, oh, my knee hurts. It's like, no, it really hurts. Like it feels uncomfortable. So I have a better understanding now, having been through something similar.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
So this is so interesting because this is a different perspective than I've heard, I think, any of our colleagues discuss hormone replacement therapy. And you're doing it from an individual genetic disposition, which I was just listening to a podcast from Mark Hyman, and he was like, this is the future of medicine, is when we can really individualize. And, you know, we in naturopathic medicine, everything is within our capacity. It's on the therapeutic order, medications, it's there. It has a place, as long as it's used appropriately and the right amount for that patient. And how do we know what's the right amount for that patient? And it sounds like genetic individuality is one of the ways we can determine how much a person should have.
Yeah, I think we're finally there. Like, there's so much more that we're going to find out in the next 5 to 10 years, that everything that I'm doing now will probably be obsolete, because it's keeping, the technology keeps going. But ever since, mapping the human genome and then getting all of these studies done, we're just now starting to make enough of a dent in the research to make meaningful clinical recommendations. I used to be a skeptic of the genetic stuff because in school, I was told by multiple people, like, it doesn't really matter, because for the listener, when we're talking about genetics, what we're talking about are single nucleotide polymorphisms. So they're not like actual flat out, genetic mutations, so to speak, but they're kind of like these little point mutations where, each gene, our DNA has basically the four different letters of the alphabet kind of mixed up in a linear code. And then we have different strands of different portions of that DNA that are coding for different proteins in our body, like different enzymes and hormones and things like that. And so what can happen is, if one little letter has a misspelling, it doesn't make you not produce that protein or produce it's not like a complete mutation. It's just a misspelling. So it just sort of alters how well our body produces that protein. And it can be too much or too little.
Right.
And so and in school, I was a bit of a skeptic, because I'm like, well, what is one little letter going to do? Or like, okay, so what if you're not producing like that much of the protein? We can boost the vitality, and like, that's going to be fine. Why do we need to look at the genetic report? That was my line of thinking, until I realized how much research we actually have on different genetics now. And we can't just look at one gene. Everyone's so focused on MTHFR.
Oh my God.
We need to be, that's like nothing. Like, I mean, I'm interested in MTHFR, but it's a little piece of the puzzle. And some people look at too many genes. Right. And there's stuff that just hasn't been well enough researched.
Right.
So if we hone it down to the genes that have been researched well, that we can actually do something about, like lifestyle wise, because we can turn these genes on and we can turn them off, or kind of like a dimmer switch, up and down.
Yep. Up regulator, down regulate.
Exactly. So our lifestyle is like the epigenetics, where we're creating an environment in our body where our genes can be in their optimal position. Right. And we can see in the genetic report that I run what we need to do in order to create the best environment for somebody's body. Yeah. So that's why I'm so passionate about it now.
Yeah, and I got interested in genetics pretty early on because I have some COMT issues, and so I don't do well with methyl B vitamins because of that. Yeah. They make me feel really crazy, and that's where like the whole like MTHFR thing comes in. So many patients are hung up on it, but if you look at the methylation cycle, which I'm guessing some of the genes you look at are in that pathway, which is huge. Like, you could put it on your entire wall and be the finest print that you could possibly read, and might even need a magnifying glass for, but it's fun to nerd out on. I started focusing on the COMT, the C-catecholamine methyltransferase, and I had really, really like severe anxiety to the point of panic attacks on a daily basis when I was growing up. And I started supplementing in school, actually, when we were in ND school, and like, we're in a similar community that's like, genetics, who cares? It made a dramatic difference. I supplemented with B6 and magnesium in pretty high doses of B6 for a while. Infrequently now, I'd say maybe once a year, if that. If it's a really stressful time, I need to supplement again. But that's the importance of what you said a moment ago. You get the lifestyle pieces on track. And I know for me, I need to make sure I prioritize not being in super stressful environments, or like being early so I'm not feeling stressed. Like the little things that make me feel more grounded and relaxed are critical to that gene not being downregulated, which makes me not process things like epinephrine and norepinephrine, which is what was making me have that, like, I feel crazy feeling inside my body. So I'm a big fan of some of this work, and I appreciate that you're bringing it kind of forward. And even though we come from the vitalistic tradition as naturopathic doctors, the genetic stuff we need to be paying attention to, because this is the future of medicine. And if we're not going to be on the cutting edge, someone else is going to be doing it. And I'm not saying, there's plenty of room for people to do it, but we need to be on the same page so that we can help our patients better.
Exactly. It's the future of medicine. And also, it's the best way to get to the root cause.
Yeah.
Because we can get down to the individuality.
Yeah.
And now that I've been doing genetics with pretty much every patient for like the last 2 years, I've seen a lot of different genetic reports and things. I can kind of look at them, and I'm sure this is how like a lot of the vitalistic, especially elder doctors, feel, is like, they just know. They have the intuition of like, okay,
Right.
is this person going to be an over-methylator or an under-methylator, or, like those nuances are there. But, as a doctor in practice now for 7 years, I think that it helps me to get to see those nuances a little bit sooner.
Yeah, build those characteristic panels so you can get a sense when the patient sits in. It's like, I bet you these are the 3 issues you've got, and then you see them and you're like, okay, I'm building that clinical skills.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you can see it on paper. It can be, very confirmatory. And most importantly, the patient can see on paper too. And that really helps with compliance when I'm saying, okay, look, or even just with HRT, I've had women on HRT come to me, and then we run their genetics, and I find out that they're pushing 100% of their estrogen into the more cancer causing. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, that's nice you're able to be on this and resolve some hot flashes, but what do you want to do? This is
we
the
got to come
information
off.
I have. All I can tell you is that this is what your genetics are saying. This is how you're pushing your estrogens. And then, like, I've never had a woman look at that and say, oh, I'm just going to keep going with this.
Well, and this speaks to why, like, I've seen some patients come to see me. We live in a state where we can't prescribe, not even hormone replacement therapy, even though we're the ones that are teaching the conventional docs how to do it. In some circumstances, I've seen women end up developing heavy bleeding post-menopause. And they haven't bled in 10 years. They go on hormone replacement therapy, boom. I've also seen them develop hypertension because of hormone replacement therapy, and then progesterone causing like the opposite effect, insomnia. And I feel anxious and crazy, and I don't understand why. And I'm like, are you on progesterone or a micronized progesterone? And they're like, yeah, I'm on 200 milligrams. And since I got on hormone replacement therapy, I just feel crazy. Hey, are there genetics that you've seen that affect how a person metabolizes progesterone and why they might be a little cuckoo instead of calm down?
So we don't have enough research genetically on progesterone to do that. So that's actually, progesterone is not a section in the report that I run yet, unfortunately. However, we know that progesterone has an effect on the GABA receptors. And GABA is like our calming neurotransmitter. And there's one gene that essentially glutamate, which is a very excitatory neurotransmitter. It makes us feel, kind of up here. It helps us to get things done, be sharp, but it can also make us feel restless and too much. And it's this, teeter-totter going back between glutamate, high, GABA, calming, you can sleep, all of that kind of thing. And the problem that we have is some people are variant for the GAD1 receptor, GAD1 gene, which makes them not be able to convert glutamate into GABA very well. So they're always up here. So they can't sleep. You get the hot flashes. So you give them something to support GABA, like passion flower, maybe, along with some melatonin, and they're able to sleep. Awesome. And the hot flashes are less bothersome. And there's some other ways that you can see in the genetics. Oh, like we can just use these herbs. We can just do this. And when we have that, you can manage these symptoms without HRT.
I mean, I
And
have really good success
yeah,
managing hot flashes and night sweats. I would say maybe with a 90% efficacy. And I'm not even running genetics. I'm just doing liver
yeah,
support, some really basic things, dandelion root, milk thistle, schisandra, like nothing insane. And like these women, some women, it's like in a month, I'm like, oh my God, you've had hot flashes for 3 years and in 1 month, you're 100% better. And I was like, I'm not even going
love
to
it.
charge you for the follow-up. See ya. Like,
I love that. Yeah,
same.
it's really, in most women, it's really not that hard. It's just trying to figure out what is the cause,
Right.
and how can we regulate these hormones out? Because in perimenopause, our estrogen's kind of like up and down and up and down.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to figure out like, what do we need to do to stabilize this?
Yeah.
And that's what HRT does. It helps
Mm-hmm.
to give a consistent, stable dose. But in those women that prefer not to take HRT because either they don't have the genetics for it or they just don't want to, we can just look to see, what are the other things we can support? We can support the liver, get those hormones being processed. We can
Mm-hmm.
use things like DIM to help to convert. DIM actually helps to convert those
Uh-huh.
proliferative estrogen metabolites into the more protective estrogen metabolites. So we can do things like that.
Interesting.
And also, we can use even some Chinese medicine herbs for hot flashes because hot
Mm-hmm.
flashes really, when we're in menopause or perimenopause, what happens is our window for our comfortable temperature, it just decreases based off of changes in our brain.
Sure.
But those changes in our brain have more to do with different types of neurotransmitters
Mm.
up there. Um, so we can have an effect on that using, some different kinds of herbs. So
Sure.
yeah.
So have you seen some of the things like I have with high blood pressure and what's the technical term? Is it menorrhagia or metorrhagia? Heavy bleeding post-menopause.
Menorrhagia.
Menorrhagia,
Mm-hmm.
thank you.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
I've seen one patient now that like she got put on HRT and within the first month, I'm like, you need to go have some imaging done. Like, this is not normal. And she came to me
Yeah.
after the fact. And I'm curious if you've seen anything like that and if there's a genetic association that you found.
Yeah, I definitely have. And the genetic association really is exactly what I just said.
The proliferative.
She's probably exactly, she's pushing her estrogens down the wrong pathway. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's just, it, her body's not able to really stabilize that. And that's not healthy for her. So her body is giving her those symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this isn't the thing for you. But yeah, I've seen people start estrogen actually gain weight, especially, and also, you see that with progesterone too.
Mm-hmm.
And, definitely some questionable situation with estrogen, someone getting put on that and then maybe having a TIA afterwards,
Right.
things like that. So I'm very passionate about this because cancers are on the rise too.
Huge.
That's something that practitioners need to understand. Like we can go back and look at some studies that are saying, oh, HRT is fine. Well, it was in that meta-analysis, I can't remember what year that was, several years ago now, but we're in a
Mm-hmm.
different world right now where cancers are on the rise. And so
Yeah.
we want to do everything we can to protect ourselves from this.
Yeah.
And this can be risky. I don't feel comfortable with just everyone being on HRT.
Do you think, or have you seen a difference in people being on patches, creams, oral versus the pellets, the super physiological dosing that lasts for 3 months?
I mean, I think that the less dose is always better. So
Yeah.
I think that, yeah, like the patches are nice because they can give a lot of consistency,
Mm-hmm.
and that tends to go over well with women that can tolerate the HRT. And I think the vaginal creams are nice if you can tolerate, if you're not pushing the HRT down the wrong pathway.
Right.
They can be very, very helpful. But there's other ways that we can address the dryness. There's all kinds of suppositories with hyaluronic acid and that sort of thing that can be
Mm-hmm.
very helpful.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, one woman, she's She's a funny lady. I appreciate her like sense of humor though. And she's like, no one told me they would feel like razor blades in my vagina. And I was like, oh my God, like that's horrendous. It's the first time I've heard that descriptor to describe the
Oh,
vaginal
that's
dryness.
terrible.
Totally.
Oh,
And
yeah, that's so bad.
have you heard of a product? And I'm not usually big on products, but she just was like, this thing changed my life. She tried the topical estradiol cream and it did nothing, she said. And so she found this product called Silky Peach. Have you heard of this? It's mostly herbal. I think there's a little estriol in it, if I'm remembering correctly. And she's like, it feels amazing. And I don't even have to use it every day. And like the tissue has kind of plumped back up a little bit. I mean, it's not like the way it was premenopause, but you know, she's like, I don't have that feeling anymore inside of my vaginal tissues. And I, you know, I don't want to have to like use products forever, but it sounds, I mean, I was pleased with the herbs that were used in it. And I think herbs, we've talked about this a little bit here. It's like herbs are very supportive for our body and they do help our body do its job and we don't have to use them forever and ever and ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
Mm-hmm. So hormonal cancers, you didn't specifically use that term, but we know we in the healthcare world know that hormonal cancers are on the rise. That meta-analysis, I have several colleagues, friends of mine that like push and see hormone replacement therapy is safe. I am in the category of you without knowing, just intuitively of like, is it though? Like, should we be mindful? Like maybe there's a reason why our body goes through and drops our hormones off. We're no longer of reproductive age. There's benefits that estrogen confers, but what's the trade-off? Because that's how everything in nature works. Like we lose estrogen and then quote unquote, we lose our bone protective, our brain protective, our cardiovascular protective. But what's the cost of us then replacing it as we age? What have you given this much thought to? I'm not sure what the trade-off is if we add hormone replacement back in.
Yeah. So, and I mean, that's one of the really promising things that we know about doing HRT early is that you can preserve your bone density a little bit, and that can be really important. So there's always a trade-off. There are people, there are women that are way at risk for osteoporosis, but they have like zero cancer in their family. And it's like, okay, yeah, like that might actually be a really good thing for you for a short window of time, to just preserve as much bone as possible.
Right.
But there are other ways to preserve bone. We can, take the really good calcium type supplements that we have available that, don't just include regular calcium, but have like the hydroxyapatite that is like the glue that holds the bones together, and the other minerals that we can use, magnesium and strontium and things like that. And so I think we think, oh, estrogen is like the only way to protect these things. But there's other things. Strength training, in the right way can help with bone density. And the interesting thing is there are, populations around the world. This isn't super well researched, but there's a little bit of research on it where, women didn't even, because they live in a different type of a world, like not a lot of stress all the time. They live in villages, things like that. Like the Mayan women they didn't even have any symptoms in menopause, and their bone density went down, but they didn't have any more fractures.
Oh, interesting.
And so just because bone density is going down, it doesn't equal more fractures.
Interesting. Okay.
In the right context.
Sure.
Now, in our world where, things are really stressful and busy, and if people
sedentary
can't slow down and they're sedentary and they can't exercise, well, yeah, let's help you build some bone using estrogen, but that's not the only way, and it's not the end all be all.
Yeah. And the other piece, I learned this after school too, that like our muscles are part of our metabolism, part of our metabolic system. Our muscles put stress on our bones. And if we're not using our muscles, AKA we're couch potatoes and even office chair workers like you and I are, that is, we get something called sarcopenia or muscle wasting. And then that then leads to the bones breaking down a little bit quicker. And the other piece to that is like, if you don't have good blood sugar management, you're not using your muscles, right? Like, so there's all these pieces that go into systemic health. And if we don't take into consideration these and we just throw hormone replacement therapy at it, like we're kind of missing This is the root cause medicine that we talk about. We're kind of missing some of these other really big pieces. And I have a number of patients that super proactive. They get weight training. They're making sure to prioritize protein and get good sleep and reduce their stress. And I know that's not possible for everyone, but man, if we could make it a priority and help women be healthier as we age, I think that would be great, and not have to spend $500 a month for bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, because that's also not feasible for a lot of people.
I know. And one thing that just drives me crazy is so many doctors, including naturopathic doctors, are prescribing, with the HRT, they're doing the testosterone, which some women feel really good with, for a while. But, let's not forget, testosterone converts into estrogen in excess. So then that can be pushed down the wrong pathway. So we have to be looking at these things. And I don't know about you, Shayna, but I see so many women at that age that, the menopausal time that are taking testosterone that are losing hair like crazy.
Yeah.
And it's from the testosterone. And they're coming, they'll come to me like, oh, I need help with hair loss. And they think I'm going to just give them a supplement or something like that. And I'm like, well, you're on a ton of testosterone. Your blood work is showing that it's very high. Let's start there.
Yeah.
And so, and the practitioners, to think we need to give hormones right away. Okay, therapeutic order. If there's something big going on where you're need to give hormones now, yeah, do that. But root cause wise, our hormones are made in our mitochondria. Why are we not supporting our mitochondria like crazy, which most people's mitochondria are shot? And that's another thing we can see in genetics, how much do you have a lot of protection in your mitochondria, or do they tend to get destroyed very easily? And if they're getting destroyed, and this is where our hormones are made, how are we going to produce the natural hormones that we need to make? So we should be focusing, I think, except for those cases where you got to intervene a little bit harder and sooner. Sure. But in a lot of these other cases, let's look at supporting the mitochondria as much as possible.
Oh, that's interesting.
But with all of the toxins we're exposed to, with the spike protein being prolific all over, it's these things damage our mitochondria. Maybe start there.
Yeah, no, that's reasonable. And the testosterone thing is interesting to me, and kind of women feel good. They feel stronger. They feel more capable on it. And again, I think there's dosing dependent. Does a woman need to be on 10 milligrams of testosterone every single day? I'm not convinced that's the right dose. And I have seen that cause harm, including hypertension. And, like you said, we got to start there. I could give herbs for hypertension, but what's the cause of this person's hypertension? They've never had high blood pressure before in their history. Oh, you just started taking testosterone, and actually they just increased your dose within the last 6 months. Could maybe be that the cause. And in fact, for that individual, it was. And so it's not rocket science, some of the things that we do. It's let's just take a peek at what you're taking, and maybe that's what's causing your issue. Or you're over exfoliating. I was just sitting in a conference, and she's like, a lot of times people with this condition are over exfoliating, and that's a contributing factor. And it's oh man.
Well, true. Yeah.
Sure.
100%.
Sure. Any final thoughts or last pieces that you would want our listeners to take caution with hormone replacement therapy?
Yeah, I would just say before doing HRT, just know that there are other ways that your body can be supported, and looking at your genetics is absolutely one way to do it. It's not the only way, but don't be misled by all of the misinformation on social media. There's so much, and there are some people that are very, very convincing, but you have to look at their background. You need, are they a doctor that's actually clinically seeing patients?
Right. Not just a researcher, because that matters. Clinical data and research data are not the same. Exactly.
So, and if your doctor is a little hesitant to put you on HRT, that's not a bad thing. There are reasons for that. It doesn't mean that, you should be withheld HRT if you need it.
No, there's a time and a place.
Yeah, exactly. So just be cautious, be aware of of the people that you're following, really.
Yeah, totally. And
Mm-hmm.
social media, I'm on social media. I use it to educate. And, I just cleaned up my social media following. And honestly, it's been a relief for my brain to not see so many different topics. And is this true? And man, I feel stressed thinking about that. So, like, don't be afraid to step away from social media. Pros and cons, there's fantastic information on there, but you have to be very discerning. And I tell people this too. You and I, we're doctors, but we're not your doctors. Talk with your doctor about what might be best for you and your care. And, I do have the opinion that we should question and be participatory in our healthcare outcomes, because doctors can't know everything no matter how good of training they have. It's just tough. Yeah. So
Yep,
how can
totally.
people, if people want to get in touch with you, April, or they're interested in working with you, how can they do that?
Yes. So my practice is Avra Health, and the website is Avra, AVRA hyphen health.com. And I actually do work with, I just hired a nurse practitioner, so she can prescribe hormones in those
Woohoo.
cases.
Yeah.
But we are just very careful about who we're going to be prescribing that to. And, it's always a conversation, of course, with the patient and what they want, but we're going to want to look at your genetics.
Yeah.
And I am licensed in Colorado, but also Arizona and Washington. So I can do telehealth in Arizona and Washington, which is
Love it.
fantastic.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you're able to prescribe in both of those states. Maybe Colorado one day
Mm-hmm.
will get on board, but maybe
Sure
not.
hope so.
Yeah, I would hope
I
so too,
sure
but I've
hope
been on the
so.
legislative.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced. We'll see.
Oh
Yeah,
no,
thank you so
that's
much for your
not
time, April.
promising.
You've given me some things to
Of
think
course.
about. That's one of the things I love about doing this podcast is like, oh, I hadn't considered that. And again, there's only so much we can know. So thank you guys for listening. And, if you found this episode interesting or controversial, or you were annoyed by something or triggered by something one of us said, drop a comment. Let's start a conversation, because that's how we learn, is by having a conversation. So like and subscribe. Thank you so much. Until next time.